this interview. Now, if you've been following the news yesterday and the previous day, Kenya is hosting quite a huge delegation of international visitors led by the UN Secretary General, the World Bank President, and the head of delegation, and a delegation from the European Union as well. Now, this morning we want to just look at, put that in context and look at what kind of future financial development assistance or partnerships are coming our way. And in the studio this morning we have Erik Habers, the development, head of development cooperation at the EU mission in Nairobi. Welcome, Erik, if I may call you that. Sure. So we seem to be hearing a lot of money coming to us. You know, first of all, how much money is coming to us, over what period of time, and to do what? Let me just frame it that way.
Okay, maybe we put it a bit in perspective, because yes, as you mentioned, the mission which was in town was basically focusing on the Horn of Africa as a region. And for that the EU is very much engaged. As you said, we were part of this of the team which was visiting the region, and the EU will make available for the region as a whole an amount available of some 3 billion euros. I'm talking now specifically for Kenya for the coming years. We just have finalized in summer, actually, together with the government, the new cooperation plan for Kenya. And there we have available some 50 billion Kenyan shillings for the next 6-7 years to work with the government on specific areas which we jointly have agreed on to work together.
Right. Can you specify that 50 billion is for what kind of project?
Okay, the 50 billion. First and for all, I'd like to say that for us, the EU, we're giving grants, so we're not in the business of giving loans like many other development partners, notably World Bank, for example, are. We're giving loans. We're giving grants. So,
but grants also are paid.
Grants are paid,
but without interest.
Without interest, and they don't have to be repaid.
They don't have to.
There's no repayment towards the EU. So what we're focusing on for the coming years, we agreed with the government to focus on 3 areas. The first area is infrastructure, and infrastructure being roads and energy, which are both strong priorities for the government.
Yes.
The second area is agriculture, and agriculture also we've defined 2 different areas. Agriculture, on one hand, basically focusing on areas in Kenya which are very difficult, the northern part, very dry, where agriculture more takes the form of livestock. I mean, agriculture per se doesn't really exist in the north, but also agriculture trying to increase output of agriculture in Kenya. We believe, and the government believes, that there's a lot of opportunity still for increasing yields of agriculture by introducing new varieties, training farmers, etc., etc. So that's the second area. The third area where we're focusing on is what we call governance, so improving governance as a whole, and there we like to work very much in the area of devolution. Devolution is new, it only started last year, so we're increasingly involved in let's say, supporting the devolution process.
If you look at the devolution aspect, for example, where is the funding going? Directly to government or the Ministry of Devolution?
The funding,
or to county governments, or how? What are the aspects?
Yeah, there's dual, actually. On one hand, the funds will go to central government and some central government institutions, but most of the funds will actually go directly to the counties.
Yeah.
And emphasis which we have there is twofold. One is basically assisting the counties in upgrading their level of competence, capacity building. Mainly on financial management, how to spend funds, how to do budget, how to make plans, how to execute plans, but also trying to stimulate in specific counties, and I think we will be choosing around 10 specific local economic development. So the counties, as you probably know, have all drawn up their local development plans.
Yes.
So we're looking with specific counties now to see how we can support specific counties in their economic development. So that can again focus on infrastructure, it can focus on livestock, can focus on specific agricultural production areas, can bring in private sector.
In energy, there's mention of Turkana project up there. What is this? What is it all about?
The wind farm
yes.
The wind farm you're referring to. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting project.
Yes.
Specifically for me as a Dutchman, we like windmills
yes,
a lot.
I know.
Since many years we have them in Holland.
Yeah.
The Lake Turkana wind power is a private initiative, as you probably have seen, but has a lot of investment from different investment parties. And European Union, through our European Investment Bank, is one of the biggest lenders actually to the project. So what is the project about? The project is about putting a number of windmills on the southern tip of Turkana, and basically generating power from the wind, which is blowing there with very constantly, as I understand, throughout the year, and connecting that basically to the grid, the Kenya power grid. So basically it's another source of power for the overall grid within Kenya.
Okay.
And that's a very much a win-win situation, because it's very clean energy. I mean, it's a one-time investment, and the wind, as I understand, is ever there. So it's very much a renewable energy source, which is very good for Kenya, which already is very good. And if you look at the energy mix, because you have a lot of geothermal energy as well. So the energy mix in Kenya is actually very good compared to many countries around the world.
Can you tell us more about agriculture in northern Kenya, which there's none? You said there is livestock development.
Yes.
And we have issues about exporting beef in European countries.
Yeah, well, let's say livestock development in itself in northern Kenya is already not easy because of the food and feed situation, because of the water situation. I mean, it's well known to be a very difficult area to make a living. So we're working on to see how to basically provide better living to the people up there by looking at livestock. You can think of vaccination campaigns. I mean, once drought kicks in, animals tend to get sick. There's less food available, there's less water available, so animals tend to get sick. So vaccination is one of the main areas where we're looking at. But also you can think about herd control. So if there is, for example, drought hits, trying to buy livestock from out of the stocks available, basically to reduce pressure on water and on food.
They don't sell. They normally they don't like selling.
No.
Even during drought time.
Yes, they don't like selling. But this is one of the that's very correct actually.
Yes.
So this is one of the issues I think which we're trying to bring into the debate to convince people actually to sell, because sometimes it's better to sell than hold on, because holding on will actually not bring any income, whereas selling will just die. But selling maybe at the right time will bring actually financial income, which will bring them over a drought period into let's say less dry period, and they would allow money basically to rebuy livestock again. So it's a matter of reducing and then increasing again herds.
Dynamics there are usually about the marketability of the livestock products and the pricing that the animals fetch when they need to go out. Is your intervention also targeting availing those markets or facilitating the marketing of those products?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest interventions which of impact there which we'll have is actually construction of roads. If you're looking, we are right now constructing actually the road which goes from Isiolo up to Marsabit. We're doing there 120 kilometers of paved road. And because actually one of the main issues is access to the market. So having the cattle close to the market. I mean that will increase already the price tremendously, because it will facilitate the sales of beef. Export is another discussion. But for exporting beef, I mean you have to look at the regulations in other markets, being the markets in the Gulf or be the markets in Europe. And that's that's a whole different dynamics. But I think the first issue is to get cattle to the markets, and that infrastructure creation actually is one of the key issues there. I was in Marsabit recently, and people there say, well, with these roads now being constructed, we feel actually very close to markets. It goes both ways. I mean, selling to the market, but also buying products from the market.
What about building abattoirs there?
Building abattoirs is definitely an option. It would require some investment of the private sector probably, because abattoirs, I don't think as government probably not the best entities to run abattoirs. So the role for the local government would be to see how to actually create conditions which would attract investment from private sector actually to do abattoirs there. But given the size of livestock which there exists in the north, I would certainly think there's room for abattoirs.
Would you say the kind of livestock husbandry there is conventional, is modern, or people just doing the traditional farming with traditional breeds And therefore, in terms of transformation of their lives, really, there is a need for another kind of intervention to upgrade the breeds, the kind of cattle they are keeping, or livestock, as part of a project that would help them.
Yeah, could be. I mean, if you talk about development, it's all this transformational process very often. I mean, it's in livestock, it's in agriculture. In agriculture, you have the same. The farmers are used to buying certain types of seed and doing specific farming in a specific way because that's how they've learned it throughout the years. So development very often is trying to get people to understand that there are other ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And this can relate to cattle, it relates to agriculture, it relates to even governance, if you take it in the wider sense. So yes, it's very much about transforming the way people are doing. I mean, you talked about people are not keen to sell their livestock. I mean, one of the issues is to try to convince them that at some point maybe it's better to sell and then rebuy. So it's therefore it's not easy. It's a long-term process. No, you have to convince people to do things differently than they're used to, or maybe that their cultural belief is. So
you have talked about governance, and I've talked about bringing experts. In that 50 billion project that you have for 6 or 7 years.
Yes.
Do you know the number of technical experts that you might bring from Europe to this country?
Yeah, not yet. We haven't come to that stage yet. That will depend on the design of each of the project. For example, if you look at infrastructure, maybe we would need less expertise from outside than if you talk about a program on devolution, where we would hope to get a lot of Kenyan expertise actually. So it's not only about bringing in expertise from outside, it's also trying to find Kenyan expertise, because notably if you look at devolution, I think there's, and notably devolution in Kenya, there's probably more expertise actually in Kenya than there is outside.
Yeah.
So this hasn't been defined yet. It will be defined over the years when we're designing the individual projects. So for agriculture, maybe we'll get some international experts.
I'm asking this because traditionally when outsiders bring money here, they bring also the money, the people to consume the money.
Yeah.
They consume the money and go away, and then they say they brought us things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it has been
skills transfer.
If you remember that book, which
but
there is a book written called
How Europe Undeveloped Africa.
No,
Rodney.
No, there's a book about
Which one?
the loans of poverty.
The loans of poverty.
Yeah.
No, that's of course that's definitely.
The development model is changing a little.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yes.
You know, a bit of capacity training, but the number of expertise or foreign expatriates who are brought in to carry out that training is reducing, right?
Yes. I think you see notably in countries like Kenya, which become middle income or are becoming middle income countries, you'll see that increasingly capacity is available actually in the country or in the region, if you want. So if you look at the East African community, I mean, there's a lot of expertise actually there. So increasingly, there is use of local expertise to do these activities.
Capacity building.
And this is actually very much a point also which the Treasury keeps on making, that we should look at ways to actually increase the number of Kenyan experts versus the number of foreign experts. And for us, it's absolutely fine. I mean, we can find experts in the local market. Even better, I would say, because at the end of the day, I mean, doing the math, it will become cheaper.
Let's look at the core Nairobi projects that are infrastructure in nature. What are the grants going towards?
Well, one of the big plans we have, or which the government of Nairobi has, is basically creating a modern public transport system for Nairobi, basically to ease the congestion. So we're discussing now with the ministry as well as with the county, or counties I should say, because it's not only Nairobi counties but also the counties surrounding Nairobi. If you look at the roads,
Kajiado,
Kiambu, etc. How to actually address it, and what's currently on the table is to develop a bus system which would run on specific dedicated bus lanes. So buses would avoid the traffic and would have specific bus lanes running on the main arteries which exist. So it's not about building new roads, but it's basically extending existing roads with bus lanes for a dedicated bus service. This is not new in the world. You have many cities in the world which have such
exactly. So they can pick and go without hindrance.
Yes, exactly. So that's the current idea. Now that will of course involve a lot of design issues
Yes.
to start with, to decide who will be responsible for it, because will it be central government, will it be local government, will it be the counties together, or will it be a combination? It will have design issues. Do you put these bus lanes next to the road, above the road? So there's a lot of issues to decide. And then also as to who will be operating the buses. Private company, evidently, or privately owned, very
Yes.
likely, or a PPP, public-private combination. So there are a lot of issues to tackle there. It's not easy, but it can be done, as I said.
So how did the grant get agreed upon before these issues are sorted out, or the design, the mechanics for implementation are worked out? How was it arrived at?
Well, let's say the decision on the main priorities
Yes.
we have with government, and there the interlocutor basically is Treasury, is the Ministry of Finance for us is the main interlocutor, and then we discuss with basically Transport or Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Devolution, to see to define these, let's say, specific programs.
Yes.
Now, if you look at again at Nairobi bus lanes, this is too much for one partner to handle. So there we're teaming up also with other developing partners. So the World Bank is involved, the African Development Bank is involved, the European Investment Bank is involved. So that will become a program which will be supported by many financiers, let's say.
Yes. When is this planned to?
Are there timelines?
When is it planned to begin happening? Even design or
design.
Okay, we talk about groundbreaking.
Yeah.
When is this
The
expected?
design is already ongoing, actually, to some extent. There's already design studies there. But as I said, we also need a discussion on the governance of the whole system. So
Yes.
that is sometimes more difficult to design, because it's not like putting a pencil and paper and just
Yeah,
writing
how
it down. It needs commitment from the people in charge, actually, to come to a new governance structure for this for such a public transport system.
But
Very carefully putting a date.
Prospective.
In a few years, I think we should be at a stage that we say, okay, not the buses are not running, but the works.
But the
works
works on
the works
the
are
construction
started.
get started.
Yes.
I mean, Nairobi has obviously had this kind of designs of architectural works, road engineering, to decongest and clean up the traffic in Nairobi for a while. I mean, we've had quite. I think it was a Belgian firm that did a major study and came up with recommendations. Are this being factored in, or we're going to look at a fresh design again, starting from scratch?
I think we're not so much looking at a new design of the all transport in Nairobi. I mean, the issue in Nairobi has been fighting with, of course, is the rapid increase of number of cars. I
Yes,
mean,
vehicle traffic.
the system basically is not designed for the current number of cars, and that will continue. If you look at the economic development, 5-6% per year GDP growth, with people from the remote area still coming to Nairobi to find work, etc., there will still be increasing pressure on traffic in Nairobi. So at some point, and other cities in the world have the same decision need to be taken. It cannot be roads alone. We need to have public transport as an alternative.
Yes.
So that decision, I think, is almost there now by government to see, okay, we need something as an alternative to the car in this city. So we're not redesigning, let's say, the overall transport infrastructure. It's not about designing new roads, and sometimes it's dualing some of the roads, as has recently been done. There's some new bypasses in Nairobi, and as I mentioned to you before, we're also ourselves working on dualing some of the roads to try to ease.
You said you're funding
points.
dueling of roads in the industrial area? Or
Industrial area, in Eastleigh area, there's some parts. We're also working on building footpaths, cycle lanes, footbridges, so trying to ease on very specific points, trying to ease a bit the situation. But that will, despite, let's say, the good intentions, probably over a number of years, we'll see again the same problems, because that will not in the end solve it.
Well, I mean, looking in as a person of European descent, and you know how things have been fixed in Europe, in most of capitals in Europe that I visited.
Yes.
You have flying, double-decker roads, you have rail together with a bus, footpaths, all these things are packed together.
Yes.
Is that feasible to do with, or wouldn't that be the holistic approach to Nairobi's traffic problems?
Yes, it would, but I think you have to be realistic in terms of what a country can carry in terms of investment.
Yes.
Because I think it's better to, frankly, it's better to compare maybe with some other countries which are middle income status. So if you look at some countries in the Far East, for example, which also have grown out of the situation from incredible traffic jams and now also start to invest in infrastructure and try to take lessons from there. So you think about Bangkok or Jakarta, which are horrible traffic situations and also are now trying to find ways to deal with it. And Jakarta, for example, has also now invested massively in bus lanes, and which is working very well. Buses are full, basically from early morning to late evening. So I think if you want lessons learned, I think it's better to look at cities which are more or less at the same level of development than look. You can take as a target maybe some, let's say, very well functioning cities in the West and say, okay, that is at the end where we want to go. And you can, in terms of intermodal, you can look at how lessons can be learned, maybe a link to the airport, which also here would be actually very necessary probably, so linking air travel to let's say road.
But I think our problem maybe is not even some of it is governance and discipline.
Yes.
You're saying talking about building footpaths and motorcycle lanes and whatever.
Yes.
You build them, tomorrow there'll be hawkers filled. The place is full of hawkers. Nobody to walk, no place to walk.
Yes.
I mean,
even those bus lanes.
Even bus lanes.
They'll just not have the discipline to use them.
If you see the way motorbikes are ridden here, even if you put a lane for motorbikes, they'll borrow for the police. I mean, I don't know.
No, it will need together with law enforcement, that's clear. But as I said before, if you look to other cities which have done it, which are also have the similar issues on law enforcement as we have in Kenya, you can see that it can be done. I mean, it's not that it's, I think there are plenty of examples around the world which show that even in cities which are difficult and where you have law enforcement issues, this can be done with specific emphasis on those points. But it's clear, you need, if you put dedicated bus lanes, you need to put mechanisms in place which avoid other users from starting to use this bus lane. Encroaching on the bus lanes, for sure. And the same is for the cycle path and the footpath. But I think increasingly, I don't know, some of the new bypasses have very nice footpaths. I mean, not constructed by the EU, but the Japanese friends, for example, is one which I live close to. I think is well used by pedestrians and by cyclists as it is intended for.
Now, recently there was this issue about the economic partnership agreement.
Yes.
And the problem this country and East African community countries had with the Europeans.
Yes.
At one time, Tanzania refused to sign. I don't know whether the matter has been resolved for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, that's the good news. No, the matter has been resolved for the benefit of everyone. The agreement has been initialed recently, so basically now we're working hard to get the agreement basically formally adopted, so that the exporters can go back to the previous.
Meanwhile, what is happening when Kenyan exporters are selling to Europe now? What's happening?
Maybe let's start. What was the issue? What was the issue that caused the delay first?
No, I mean, personally, I've not been involved in the negotiation. But trade negotiations are always, let's say, lengthy, because look at trade negotiations around the world, they're always lengthy, and this one was also very lengthy. And many issues always are left towards the very end, and one of the rules which applies to trade agreement always is there is no agreement until we've agreed on everything. So there's always a few issues remaining to the very, very end, and these are the most sticky ones. And then time pressure will build up, which will everyone basically put together, and this pressure cooker at some point will lead to results, and luckily we've seen the same here. So I don't think now I don't think it adds anything to say what actually were the issues. Actually, I don't know what precise issues were still at stake. I think the good news is now that the agreement is initialed, and we're basically off to a situation which is very good for Kenya, that exporters will able to again export to the European Union with zero tariffs. So that is basically the good news for all the export which is going to Europe, be it flowers, be it the agricultural products. It will go under the same. In
the meantime, what is happening when they export now?
In the meantime, until the ratification takes place, there is still, for specific products, there is specific tariffs are in place.
They have to pay.
But the private sector has been well informed on that well in advance. So they're aware. They have to pay. They will have to pay. Yes.
In this kind of partnerships that countries, say EU signs with Kenya.
Yes.
What is normally, let me say, where what determines what EU will fund or grant? Is it based on the country requests or priorities, or also EU's own consideration of what it thinks?
I think a bit of both, but mainly what the country wants. Let's say if you look at Kenya specifically, we have of course Vision 2013 and the Midterm Development Plan, so MTP2. So this basically has been guiding us in what to support. Then, as I mentioned, we have a dialogue with the Ministry of Finance, Treasury, and we try to come to an agreement. For us, I mean, I can be frank, we were not so keen initially to continue to finance road, although we've done so for the last 25 years in Kenya, because we believe that countries like Kenya should be able to find finances for roads infrastructure from lenders, from the banks, basically, World Bank, African Development Bank, European Investment Bank. Since we are putting grants, we thought, let's say, these are more probably effective in areas where development is more difficult. As I mentioned, the northern part where you will not find easily money going which comes through loans. But after long discussion with the government insisted very much on us keeping, let's say, remaining involved in road construction. So therefore, in the end, we said, okay, fine, if that's what you want, we will continue. So this is a discussion on priorities, which, let's say, both sides put in some elements, and then a commonly agreed plan comes out.
Yeah. Talking about road construction, a lot of European contractors, building contractors, the road companies, building companies, have been edged out by the Chinese companies, even including Kenyan companies that build roads. How is the situation? How does it feel?
Yeah, well, for us, let's say for our tenders are only open to European and African companies. So the roads we are building, you will not find Chinese. You will not find Chinese contractors. On the other hand, I think if you look at it in value for money, from a Kenyan perspective, you're trying to find the best constructor, let's say, which is constructing your road for the lowest price. I mean, that's typically where any builder would go after, probably. You have to ensure quality, evidently, but there is enough construction ongoing, I think, in Kenya to allow many partners to be active here.
There has been the perception, of course, which has been rubbished, that the level of partnership between traditionally Europe and in Kenya, for example, European countries and Kenya, or rather the West with Kenya, has been eroded, to the advantage of Chinese, especially, not just Asian. Is that perception real or imaginary?
Well, I think what's changing is basically what you observe is a change in the world. No, it's not anymore bipolar. It's multipolar, right? So and I think what you see currently in Kenya is a reflection of that. It's not anymore the traditional which you saw 40, 50 years ago, where you had the West and you had Africa. Yeah. Suddenly you have the West, you have Africa, you have Asia,
East and others.
You have South America with Brazil, etc.
Even Brazilian, yes.
You have Russia. So I think what you see is a reflection of the changing constellations in the world, which on a micro level you see happening within Kenya as well. Is that bad? No, I don't think it's bad. I think it's good. It offers also for Kenyan industry and exporters basically other markets. Yeah. So I'm sure there's lots of people in Kenya now looking at other markets, to India, for example, or to China for exports. I mean, there's still a bulk of the exports still going to Europe, but I'm always encouraging exporters to also look at other markets, to diversify, etc. So, no, I think in this development there is room for more players than. So
there's nothing that Europe can lament about Kenya's cooperation with Kenya,
with China.
With China?
No, with Kenya. I mean, European cooperation with Kenya. There's nothing to. That you are grousing about?
No, I mean, what is changing?
Nothing has been lost.
Well, what is changing, of course, if you have more players in the field, you have maybe less attention.
Yeah,
I mean, that's clear, no? Yes, but as I said, that's a reflection of what you have in the global world as well. Yeah. So there's less time maybe available if you compare it to the past situation. But in terms of the depth of the relationship, we have a very deep relationship with Kenya, which goes.
Somebody says, in fact, the reason The argument has been that we are drifting towards China because they are less stringent in their partnership or development cooperation
Right.
compared to Europe.
Yes.
And that you normally have very firm conditions that we're not comfortable with. In fact, somebody further says that EU development funds are offered through bureaucratic conditions which sometimes cannot spur economic growth. This is Tuliamuk Francis from Kapenguria.